Hi, everybody. I'm Amelia.
I'm Tom.
All right. And we have a story for you from Luke 23, which I'm going to tell. And afterwards, I have a little bit of a story about the story or about our attempt to record the story.
All
Anyway, here's the story from the
right.
Gospel of Luke. When they came to the place that is called the skull, they crucified Jesus there, and with him, two criminals, one on his right and one on his left. And then Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. And they cast lots to divide his clothing. The people stood by watching, but the leaders scoffed at him, saying, He saved others. Well, let him save himself. If he is the Messiah of God, his chosen one. The soldiers also mocked him, coming up to him with sour wine and saying, If you are the king of the Judeans, save yourself. And there was also an inscription over him that read, This is the king of the Judeans. One of the criminals hanging there with him kept deriding him, saying, If you are the Messiah, save yourself and us. But the other one rebuked him and said, Don't you fear God, for you are under the same condemnation as he is. We have been condemned justly and are getting what we deserve for our deeds, but this man has done nothing wrong. And then he said to Jesus, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And he replied, Truly, I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. Okay, that's the story. And we
Love
were,
story.
yeah, but we were recording it earlier today and hit kind of just maybe halfway through. And all of a sudden, the screen went blank and there was a big crash outside. And I looked out my window and saw the power lines waving. So we went out, and what had happened was a dead tree on the kind of in this woods on the edge of our property had fallen down and taken with it the power lines, which were all over our neighbors' yards. It was a big mess. Tom called 911, and it was amazing how fast we had a huge fire truck here and a squad, and then they called for help, and they blocked the streets and all of that. But we actually got our power back on tonight. But I was thinking about that. It seemed so kind of fitting for in the midst of the crucifixion story to have everything go black and a big crash, and kind of felt like a mini disaster. It just reminded me of other places in the crucifixion story where the sky turns dark and the temple curtain is torn in two. But in this case, we just have a piece of the crucifixion, and it's a little strange to be doing this story the Sunday before Thanksgiving and not that far away from Christmas. So I guess my first question is, why this story in the lectionary? I mean, people who follow the lectionary and that rhythm of the church year can guess at why, because that Sunday is designated as Christ the King Sunday. But why would they have? I mean, just talk about that a little bit, if you would, Tom, about why that story would be picked.
Well, it's a theological uh, conviction. that this is the story about Jesus uh, being enthroned. In John, there is the term that he will be lifted up is an intentional pun. That means both that he will be exalted and that he'll be crucified, lifted up on a tree. Um, in this case, the king of the Jews, of the Judeans, is named twice in the story. So the issue of Jesus' kingship, of his royal position, is on the one hand mocked, and on the other hand, clearly in the belief of the storyteller, is confirmed by the way in which Jesus conducts himself as he is being crucified.
Thanks. That helps. So Jesus is crucified, and it explains, gives us detail. He's crucified between two criminals, one on his right and one on his left. Who were these? I mean, what would these criminals have been guilty of? Were they like Barabbas, who was probably an insurrectionist,
He is
freedom
named
fighter
as
for the Jews?
that. Yeah,
Pardon?
he is named as
Right.
a one who was committed murder and was an insurrection leader.
Mm-hmm.
The criminals are not named as insurrectionists, in contrast to Mark and Matthew. Both of them use the term lestes, which Josephus uses often, 67 times in his book, The Judean War. So it was so these men are then named by Luke as being doers of evil, as criminals, as ones who had broken the law, but not as insurrectionists in the
Yeah.
way that is the case in the other passion narratives.
And that sort of makes sense because the one criminal says, we're getting what we deserve for our deeds. So it just sort of seems like if they were freedom fighters, they wouldn't be necessarily, he wouldn't be holding himself accountable as a criminal, a bad person who done some
Right.
horrible thing.
Right.
Okay. But now, so we're still in the first episode. Jesus is crucified, place of the skull, and there's two criminals, one on each side. And then the very next thing is Jesus saying kind of something quite remarkable, I think. Addressing God as Father, forgive them for they don't know what they're doing. The question I had is who's the them? Is he referencing the soldiers, or Pilate, or the crowd who called for his crucifixion? And then sort of what does he mean by they don't know what they're doing?
The implication is that they think that the Romans may think that he's an insurrectionist. The Judeans and the Judean leaders find him to be, and the people, as a false Messiah, as one who claimed to be the Messiah, but was not, and that his failure to lead the nation in battle against the Romans was a sign of that failure of his as a Messiah, as a messianic figure. So they mock him for his pretending to be a Messiah.
Right. And that's what's next after. Well, first of all, you have after the statement about forgive them, which I think is a powerful statement Jesus gives. Then there's the casting lots to divide his clothing. And then you have this series of responses. So the people stand by watching. And then the elders and the soldiers and one of the criminals scoff, mock, and deride him. And I, when I really was working on the story and sort of imagining this, I thought, what, to have all these different groups of people um, treating you like that when you're dying, it's just it's kind of unimaginable. But what is, I mean, is there a kind of a literary purpose to the taunting, to all of that, or what is the meaning of all of that?
One of the motifs in ancient war stories is the taunting of an opponent before battle. So a classic is the taunting between Hector and Achilles in the Iliad, uh, which comes just before Achilles kills Hector. Uh, and so they challenge each other. The classic instance of that taunting in the biblical tradition, in the traditions of Israel, is David and Goliath. So I'll just read a little bit of that so that you can get a sense of.
Okay, look at us, Tom. Hold the book up.
Okay, the book up.
Yeah,
Right.
we don't see the top of
So
your.
the Philistine said to David, "Come to me, and I'll give your flesh to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the field." And David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This very day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. And I will give the dead bodies of the Philistine army this very day to the birds of the air and to the wild animals of the earth, so that all the earth may know there's a God in Israel." And so this taunting back and forth between David and Goliath is a classic instance of this motif in the battle stories. And so in this case, they are taunting Jesus in the terms of and in the tradition of taunting for battle. And in this case, Jesus is already lost. And so they're making fun of him as one who's dying after having, in terms of the tradition, in terms of his having fought and lost. In this case, it is a sign of his triumph that in his dying that he is victor and is then truly the king of Israel.
Right, and unlike David, he doesn't return harsh words for harsh words.
Right.
Right. So then that sort of takes us up to the second criminal. There's kind of a conversation. I wouldn't exactly call it a conversation, but between the criminals and Jesus. So the one criminal is deriding him, and the other one says, why are you doing this? You're under the same sentence of condemnation. And then asks Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. So he clearly he does believe Jesus is the kind of king, is the Messiah, apparently. But so what's the tone of that? And then Jesus responds, truly you will be with me in paradise. What's the tone of that conversation, if you will?
Well, it's a tone of conciliation and camaraderie between men who are dying together. So this is a conversation in which the other criminal addresses Jesus as one who is to be king, who will come into his kingdom. And so he establishes himself as one who believes that Jesus is the Messiah.
Right.
And the tone of this is the tone of a close conversation of men who were close to each other on the crosses. So it is a sign of Jesus being recognized as king.
It's interesting, the story with the repetition of, if you are the Messiah, save yourself. If you are the King of the Judeans, save yourself. 3 times you're getting that. If you are the Messiah, save yourself and us. Because, Jesus means God saves. The word means that, I believe.
Right.
So then you have one criminal who clearly doesn't really believe he is, and the other one who does. It kind of, when you listen to the story, then functions to ask yourself, what do I believe? Do I believe he was, God's anointed one? Right. He wasn't God's anointed one as a sense of being a warrior who was going to overcome, throw off the Roman oppression, but he was a different kind. And he talks about paradise in that last, truly, you'll be with me in paradise. He doesn't say the kingdom or the kingdom of heaven or something like that. He says paradise. Is that the first time that word has been used? And
yes.
What is it?
Then paradise was the word paradiso, means a garden. So it evokes the memories of the Garden of Eden. But it was, the most beautiful places, the places of serenity and peace and beauty were the great gardens of the ancient world. And so paradise evokes then the image of a beautiful garden. So it's more specific and than the more general things that are evoked by the name heaven, which has clouds associated with it, and the various myths about heaven.
All right.
This is paradise.
Well, a place you would want to be.
Right.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, but all the talking that's going on in this story, Jesus only says these 2 things. One about forgiveness, and then one about with confidence. You sort of hear him confidently saying, today you will be with me in paradise. So powerful. Okay, so what would be implications of this story for ministries of peace and justice?
This is a story of the affirmation of Jesus' way of nonviolence. So it's the fact that he is being crucified and is giving his life for the people is a sign of his authority, and it is recognized then as Jesus being the one who has been chosen by God to lead the people to a new life. It is in the context, in Luke's story, it was being told in the more or less immediate aftermath of the Jewish-Roman War, in which more than 1 million Jews were killed. Having chosen that way, the way of the revolution, with the choice of Barabbas. So that it's an invitation to think about what kind of Messiah, what kind of leader can bring us to a place of peace. And this story affirms that it is Jesus of Nazareth, whom God has chosen and anointed as the Messiah, who has shown us the way to peace, which is the way of nonviolence.
And given that this is the last story, last scripture for year C of the Revised Common Lectionary, that's a good place to end, I think. I can understand why they might have chosen this one for Christ the King Sunday.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, well, thanks for watching. Have a good week, everybody.
Yes, indeed. Peace.